Hi, welcome to this SimplyMaya Free Friday tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to cover the process of building a camera rig to help you take some of the guesswork out of calculating depth of field. Now this is something that comes up on the forum quite a lot. People have trouble calculating the distances of depth of field, animating their depth of field. So I'm going to show you how to build a quick, simple rig to make this a much more visual process. So we're going to start by creating a camera. And I'm just going to create a standard camera. Now what I want is to be able to aim this camera at something and have that become the point where the camera is focused. So I'm going to create a focus plane by merely creating a quick polygon plane. I'm going to set its Z to -12 so we move it away from the camera. I'm going to rotate it 90. I'm going to go to its inputs. I'm going to set its width and height at 3. So I can see it, and then I'm going to set its subdivisions to 2 so it becomes a sort of crosshair. Now if I look through my camera now, you can see that I've got this large crosshair on my camera which should be useful for aiming it, but what I want is to be able to calculate the distance between here and here. So first things first, I'm going to create a simple measurement tool, and I'm going to use the distance tool. I'm going to click by the camera, I'm going to click over here. Now with this one selected, so let's go to our selection tool. I'm going to make this -12, so it's here, and I'm going to make this 0, so it's at the exact center of the plane. I'm going to do the same thing with this one here. I'm going to set it to all 0. So now you can see that this focal plane, as we're going to call it, is actually 12 units away from the camera. Now if I grab this locator and this camera and then parent them together, when I move the camera, you'll see our distance here automatically updates itself. So I'll set the camera back to 0, and what I want to do again is focus the plane also to this parent the plane to this locator. So parent, and now I can do the same thing with the plane. And I'll just put that back to -12. What I don't want to be able to do, however, is when I'm looking through my camera, I don't want to be able to accidentally grab this focal plane and move it, say, over here. This is not what I have in mind. I just want to be able to move it forward and backwards. So I'm going to go to the planes, translate X and Y, and just lock selected. This way, when I hit move, I can't actually accidentally move them anywhere that they shouldn't go. Now the other thing I'm going to have a problem with this setup at the moment is if I was to introduce a ground plane. So let's just throw in a polygon plane here and scale it up and hit 6. You'll see that when I look through my camera, I can actually see my focus plane, and if I take a render, I'll be able to see it in the render as well. This is not at all what I want, and also now I have this unshaded view. This no longer acts like a crosshair. So before we connect this to any sort of depth of field and make it a true focus plane, we'll correct that. So back to perspective, and I'm going to add this to a new layer. So new layer and add selected, and under this I'm going to set this to unshaded. So it doesn't matter what everything else is, this will always be unshaded on its own layer. So let me just get rid of my floor plane here. Now we have one other problem. When we move the camera, the plane doesn't move with it, and I would like my focus plane to move with my camera. So I'm going to select the focus plane, select the camera, and just parent those together too. So now when I rotate or move, my focus plane and my camera stay together, and if I grab my plane, I can only change the depth of focus. So there we have it. That's a simple camera rig for controlling depth of field. All we need to do now is connect it to the depth of field, which is not as difficult as it sounds. We'll just take our camera here under the attribute editor, and you can either select your camera down here or push this to select your camera when you're on the camera. So this selects camera shape 1. or if you're in the perspective view, if you just select this, it'll also select camera shape 1. Now if we go down to depth of field and tick it, at the moment the focus distance for the depth of field is set at 5 units. Now ideally what we'd like is it to be set at 12.09 units, and when we move this again we'd like it to automatically adjust to what we are now calling our focus plane. So I'm going to open up the hypershade real quick. I am going to pop open my outliner. I'm going to drag in my camera here, middle mouse drag in my distance here, and what I want to do is connect this to my camera. So again I'll just go to cameras, drag in the camera shape, middle mouse drag this to the camera shape, and you'll see other here. Now what you want to do is connect the distance to the depth of field. You can either connect it through the connection editor here, or there's a simpler way. If you select the camera shape, you'll see here focus distance. Simply grab this, middle mouse drag it to focus distance, and you'll immediately see that the focus distance for our depth of field will match what we set this plane to. Now this takes out all the guesswork of where your camera is actually going to be focused. Just to give an example of this, I'll create 3 spheres, nothing too fancy. I will select my camera, so my camera shape 1, and you can see here I've got my aiming rig on the screen. You can also see that at the moment it's bisecting the 3rd sphere here. So if I were to take a render now, what you should see is that this sphere will be in focus and these two will not. So let's just take a quick render of this, and what I've got is my focus plane is still visible on the screen. So first things first, I'll select it, go up to its render stats, and just turn off its primary visibility, and it's visible in reflections and refractions and so on and so forth. And also I'm going to select my perspective view again. Now I can get a better look at exactly where my focus plane is, so maybe if I moved it a bit closer and then grab the camera and move the camera like so, I can now sort of zero in my camera shot. Okay, so just take a look at the camera itself, and you can see here that there. So our depth of field will now be on this, and these will be out of focus. Let's do another render. Okay, so what I have here is a very in focus sphere and 2 very out of focus spheres in the back. Now if you wanted to, let's say, put this one in focus, you can either move your camera to it, and this will obviously now focus this one, but we've now chopped this one out. So again, panels perspective, and we'll just grab our aiming point here, push it backwards. Okay, back onto our perspective view, our camera view, quick render, and now out of focus, in focus. So what you've done is created for yourself a camera focus plane that allow you to easily adjust where your depth of field is going to be. See, focus the back one, unfocus the front two. Now obviously you can go into the camera settings again and change the amount of depth of field. So if we put the f-stop to say 12, we'll have a lot less depth of field. So this one's almost in focus now. If we were to change this to say 24, you'll see the effect, just save this one, is even less. So this is only now slightly out of focus and these two are in focus. I'll just set this back to 5.2 and render again, and there we go. And again, to get this one in focus, I just basically need to grab my plane here and adjust where it is. If we now go back to our perspective, to our camera, and render, You'll see I have the middle one in focus and these two out of focus. I also have control over how large my depth of field effect will be with my f-stop. So there you go, a nice quick simple way to build a focus plane in Maya for your camera and easily control your depth of field.